Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to this Coastal Conservancy webinar on meaningful community engagement in project development. So my name is Julia Elkin. I'm a project manager here at the Coastal Conservancy. I want to provide a little background about why we're offering this webinar before I get into the day's agenda and introducing our speakers. So a bit about the Coastal Conservancy. We're a non-regulatory state agency, and it's our mission to act with others to preserve, protect, and restore the resources of the California coast, ocean, and San Francisco Bay Area. So we're one of the state's only project-based agencies. That means that we work closely with local governments, tribal governments, and nonprofits to improve natural lands and waterways, sustain local economies, and help people access and enjoy the outdoors. I want to be clear that Conservancy staff are by no means experts on community engagement. We're each on a learning curve of how to better approach this work. But over our agency's 40+ years of project experience, we've seen again and again that projects with deep community engagement during the project development phase often achieve the most tangible, lasting, and equitable outcomes for the public good. So as a public funder and a public agency, it's our aim to elevate strong community engagement approaches so that we can ensure public funds are helping to create and support robust public projects that serve all Californians. In addition to hosting today's webinar, I wanted to let you know the Conservancy is also developing a draft handout on tips for how to do meaningful engagement. It's a resource that we're developing in hopes that we can include it along with our grant application materials to really scale up this learning and adoption of best practices. So we'll be sharing that handout at the end of the presentation. And to all of you on the call, we would really love your input and feedback. As I said, we're not the experts, but we do want to help facilitate this dialogue and make the best of our position as a public agency to further these efforts. So with that introduction, and before I introduce our speakers, I want to poll you all and get a feel for who's on the line today. So if you're participating from a computer, please use your screen to respond to the following questions. You're going to have about 15 seconds to get in your reply here. And our first question is, what type of organization do you work for? Great. I see you've mastered the tech. We've got the responses rolling in here. Giving it 5 more seconds. All right, terrific. So looks like we have almost half of our audience are nonprofit members. Next biggest audience, about 30% of you all are federal or state agency employees, 15% with local jurisdictions, and 9% other. Excellent. All right, next question. What is your level of expertise with community engagement? Oh, good. I see a couple all-stars dialing in here. Thanks for calling in today. Appreciating folks on the other end of the spectrum as well. This is terrific. Really good mix. 5 more seconds. All right. Thank you. So it looks like about half of us are coming in sort of middle of the spectrum here. We've got experience. We're open to learning more. Thank you to the many of you who seem pretty far along in your expertise with community engagement. I think that'll lead to a really robust dialogue. Great. And our final question, what are you most interested in learning about community engagement? All right, great, thank you. So it looks like some of our leading interests as a group, granted we only gave you 4 options, you probably have many other interests, but it looks like the effort to create and sustain those long-term relationships with community is a leading interest, pretty closely followed by best practices for community engagement. About 60% of you are interested there as well. And as always, we're all looking for those resources to support this good work. So great, thanks for that, guys. All right, so moving on to our agenda for the day. We've done our introductions, and we'll be hearing from two projects today. We're going to each present for about 15 minutes. Our third speaker couldn't make it today, so we're in the positive situation of having extra time to hold for your questions and discussion after both of our presenters finish. So our first speaker is Rachel Saunders of the Big Sur Land Trust, and Rachel will discuss the robust community engagement process that Big Sur Land Trust and their coalition of partners have undertaken to co-create a park and open space at CARR Lake, which is in the heart of Salinas, Monterey County. And then our second speakers are going to be Michelle Montano of the Council for Watershed Health and David Diaz of Active San Gabriel Valley, and they will be discussing community engagement conducted during development of the Merced Avenue Greenway, which is in the city of South El Monte in Los Angeles. So before I hand it over to Rachel, some final housekeeping. I'm sure you've probably noticed you are all muted. During the call, we will all be muted except for the speakers. But if you have any questions during the presentations, please type them onto your screen. You'll see in your control box for the webinar, there is a questions tab. If you click down on the arrow, there's a field where you can enter your questions, and we will track those and get to them after our speakers have gone. Also, so you know, we are recording today's presentation. So after we're done, you'll receive an email with a link to the presentation, and it will also be posted on our YouTube channel and website, so you can share it with others who are unable to attend. All right, thanks so much for your attention, and with that, I'd like to turn it over to Rachel.
Screen mode. Okay, so I'm hoping everyone can hear me. Again, my name is Rachel Saunders, and I'm the Director of Conservation for the Big Sur Land Trust. And I will, if there's any issues with the technical piece of this, I will trust that the organizers will send me a little chat and let me know that there's a problem. We are delighted to have the opportunity to present about the community engagement work that we are doing associated with a project in the city of Salinas to create a new park. The screenshot you have that you're looking at shows, you can see right in the middle of that photograph, a large green space, which is agricultural land at the moment. And that is known as CARR Lake, and it is central, right in the heart of the city of Salinas. Salinas being, if not the largest, one of the largest cities on the Central Coast. I wanted to, at the beginning, thank the Coastal Conservancy, not only for their support of our work, but also really just being one of the more progressive state agencies in terms of considering community engagement and also looking at issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you very much. And a shout out to our consultant team on this first slide, which we are working with a landscape architect called BFS Landscape Architects, and also with an organization called the Center for Community Advocacy. Their logo is to the right, bottom right of the slide. CCA, as we call them, is a farm worker rights group that works on a host of issues affecting the lives of farm workers in the Salinas Valley. And we're also working with a firm that specializes in hydrology, because CARR Lake is a very important hydrological feature within the city of Salinas. Let's see, why is that not moving? Page down. There we go. Sorry. Just a few quick things about the mission of the Land Trust. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit, like many of you. We have been around for 40 years. We were established in 1978, so we're celebrating our 40-year anniversary. We have worked to conserve over 40,000 acres in Monterey County, which is the area we work. Over the last 10 years, we've really expanded our work, our mission, where we work in the county, and how we do our work, which relates back to the topic of today on community engagement and how we're doing that now. We do work in facilitating conservation projects. We're really looking at multi-benefit green infrastructure projects where we're really employing nature to provide services, important services for people. And obviously we pay a lot of attention to land stewardship, and we also have a strong outdoor programming component to our work now, which started about 5 or 6 years ago. So you see our mission to inspire love of land across generations, to conserve our unique Monterey County landscapes, and importantly, to provide access to outdoor experiences for everyone. Here. Whoops, wrong direction. Sorry. This is a picture, a drawing of CARR Lake, which is at the bottom of the Gabalon Mountains. It was one of 7 kind of swampy lakes, shallow lakes that was cleared and drained in the late 1800s, early 1900s to facilitate farming. And you can see it was one of about 7 swampy, shallow lakes that extended from the Gabalon Mountains all the way out to Monterey Bay. There are 3 creeks running through it, Alisal, Natividad, and Gabalon, with a smaller tributary called Hospital Creek. The area outlined in red is the property that the Land Trust acquired from the Akita family. So since the 1920s, 3 Japanese American families have owned the farmland that's depicted on that map. And one of those families, the Akitas, was ready to move on. And we have been in conversation with them actually since about 2008 in ebbs and flows, and then had the opportunity when they were ready to sell their property to work with them starting in 2015. And we acquired the property in the beginning of 2017. All of CARR Lake is about 480 acres. The piece that we own is 73. Again, the opportunity to implement a multi-benefit project that enhances parkland in a relatively park-poor city to do ecological restoration, provide for water quality improvements, and help with flood management has been what we have framed out as a project. You'll see some of these slides are bilingual. In all the public presentations that we have done, all of our presentation materials are bilingual in Spanish and English. A clear goal of our work has been to work with community to design a multi-benefit park. And you're probably asking, well, what do you mean by community? Because there are lots of communities in Salinas. So we mean it in the broadest sense of working with community, with residents who live in Salinas in different sectors of the city. But also we are focused, at least initially, we focused our efforts on communities of people that live closest to the CARR Lake site, which are largely Latino, largely farm worker families, but not exclusively. And so it was important to the Land Trust to be able to lift up and work with partners in lifting up the voices of those residents who haven't always been heard and had the opportunities that they should have in participating in processes like this. So here's an overarching timeline of our process. We are in phase 5 now, which is looking at taking a kind of a high-level vision concept, which we worked with through a number of community engagement activities to develop. And now, over these next 2 years, we'll be fine-tuning that concept into a site plan and going through environmental review. So as you can see from the timeline, one has to have a long-term vision and be persistent through this process and committed to it. And so we're going to be putting the work now in these next 2 years in refining that vision, conducting a variety of studies, developing a site plan, doing environmental review, and through that ensuring that we continue to engage a variety of communities in that process. So the way we started this for the Land Trust was to first build institutional understanding, so to look inside first. And in 2015 and 2016, we had both staff and board retreats, recognizing that some of the old dominant models that both agencies and nonprofits often use really looks at our institutions as the experts who are there to plan for other people, and shifting that to a more community-centered model where there's nothing about me without me, where we're really honoring the expertise and real-world experience of residents who live in the area where we are doing a project and wanting to partner. So we don't see ourselves as sole experts talking to community or at community, but where we're co-learners with community and providing the opportunities for community to lead and recognizing their experience and knowledge. We also adopted a number of values, and we put all of this out to community members for their response. And, some of our core values associated with this work is that we strive to engage in this work with a lot of humility and persistence, I would add to that list, and patience, and being, transparent, reliable, dependable, and also flexible, and that we put a premium on cultivating trusting and respectful partnerships throughout the process, and to listening to community voices for shaping the ultimate design of a CARR Lake Park based on those voices and a number of other considerations that I will get to in a minute. So we have these circles of engagement. We started, you can see in the lower left-hand part of the slide, in the internal work that I mentioned. We then developed a core planning team, and I'll get to the members of that in a moment, to really help us plan logistics and give us some advice while we were in the process of trying to acquire this 73-acre piece of land in the middle of the city. And over time, we expanded that core planning team to a larger partners group who could work with us, and we could work with them and learn from them in terms of bringing residents into the process. And then looking to those partners to help engage and develop resident leaders, both adults and youth, and then broaden that engagement to larger parts of the community. So some of our partners, the initial ones with the white asterisks, were part of this core group. So obviously it was the Land Trust, which included several board members of ours as well as staff. The 3 department heads from the city of Salinas for community development, parks, and public works. A partner, Return of the Natives, who we're still working with, who has a lot of experience in restoration and doing work in Salinas. Building Healthy Communities, which is a key organization within the city, has a lot of experience and expertise in community engagement. And CHISPA, which is a housing, low-income housing development corporation, which we've worked a lot with on our youth programs. And providing opportunities for youth in neighborhoods that CHISPA has developed to participate in outdoor experiences. And also the Monterey County Health Department, because of the realization that parks are key to not only community vitality, but public health. And then the Center for Community Advocacy joined the larger partners group and really stepped up and expressed their interest in really partnering with us on engagement activities. And we actually then have developed a contract. We're working with CCA, as I mentioned. CCA is a farm worker rights advocacy organization that's worked a lot with engaging families in a whole range of issues. And they've really focused their work in neighborhoods near Carr Lake. They conduct what they call door-to-door campaigns, where they literally go door to door and talk to people and start developing committees of resident leaders. And so they've come out to the property. There's an apartment complex right near our property where they've done a lot of work with the residents and families in that apartment complex. Some of these photographs are taken within one of the storage buildings at the property, tours on site, and really working to engage residents and connect these residents who live nearby to this piece of property, and have actually provided them use of the space on the property for a variety of activities. And so they have also taken a leadership role in facilitating some of our partner activities. We also have engaged with Return of the Natives, and we decided to develop a restoration demonstration garden on the property as a way to educate both part of the learning journey on what restoration in the future might look like, and as a way to engage community in hands-on activities and reach students in a variety of schools. This led to a community visioning and planting day at the site at the beginning of 2018. We had well over 100 people attend. We developed a model of engagement there where we were able to collect important demographic information to learn from people about who's in the room, also do education on the Carr Lake site, provide a hands-on opportunity, and collect their dreams and aspirations for this. For the site, you can see the young women on the lower right-hand side of the screen holding up their declarations of what their hope for the Carr Lake site will be. And so that gave us some initial idea of some of the types of things that community members were thinking about. We also reached out to the Salinas Chamber of Commerce, and you can see the tree planting activity there in one of the slides. So part of that initial outreach, we gained a lot of ideas from that first planting and visioning day about people's feelings about nature and having a gathering place, walking and running trails, a place that's friendly towards kids and families, a place for healthy exercise and for play. And part of the challenge and opportunity with this particular site is to educate people and ourselves about the natural characteristics of that particular piece of land, which is in a major FEMA floodway, and what can actually be built where, what kind of development can occur both on what we call the area above the floodplain versus what will be within the floodplain in terms of more traditional park type activities versus restoration in more natural areas. This initial feedback helped us frame some of the presentations for larger community design meetings, which we held throughout 2018. We worked with the city in identifying a central location in the city that was well known to everyone. The city of Salinas was great in providing us translation equipment. We had a translator who was wonderful, and all the presentations were in English with translation. And the breakout groups, however, we had multiple tables of Spanish-only speakers working together to provide their ideas. So we asked some initial questions about what would make this a special place for you, a fun place, a safe place. And as we moved down through the process over those series of meetings in August, September, October, and November, then really touching base, coming back to community who was present, and making sure that their ideas were included, really taking the temperature on what they liked, what they wanted to change, what concepts they liked best, and for things that we couldn't include, being very clear as to why that was the case. So this relates to some of the challenges and lessons that we have learned, and we are learners in this process. So this relates to being very transparent and straightforward. So the first item here is that there are no shortcuts to effective community engagement. One of the lessons we learned is the time it takes to build relationships, and we spent much of 2017 doing that work, which is just, not just, but is showing up again and again and again, and learning, asking questions, understanding the history of the site, concerns that people have, understanding how people want to be involved. It takes time. The other is a consideration of what else is going on in the community. So Salinas is amazing in that they're right now doing a whole number of planning activities, and a number of plans are being developed that are involving the community in different ways, and we needed to be really cognizant, not only to ensure things as simple as not scheduling a meeting one night at the same time that another meeting that folks want community to attend, so that they're not happening at the same time and we're in conflict. So everything from that to just recognizing the demands on community to show up and participate, and not trying to overburden people. Also understanding and managing expectations, the length of time development of a park will take, and being upfront and honest about that, and the right timing of doing that engagement. And managing the expectations relative to what we can do on the property, which I'll get to in a second. And then again, that commitment, that was one of the questions that people had on this call. You know, how do you create and sustain long-term community engagement? And it requires a commitment to a sustained effort. We can talk more about that. Being real, honest, transparent from the very beginning. What kind of decision space does the community have? What are the parameters for the project? So for this project, the parameters that define what can happen on our property are a number of them. It's partially the funding that we've gotten and the outcomes that are expected associated with that. It's what the natural characteristics of the land, what the land tells us is possible, what other regulatory considerations there are for this particular piece of property, which floods and is in a floodway. So you really want to define the canvas that you are asking people to paint on, so that you're not misleading anyone about what's possible. So, for example, some people have asked if housing was possible. So housing, which is a big issue in the city of Salinas and many communities in California, is not possible on the particular property that we have, although we do own on that land 2 residences that we are renting out. But in terms of larger scale housing development, that would not work here, and so we explain why that's not possible. Shared leadership and access, again, honoring local expertise, really stepping back as an organization and having others lead, creating an environment where there's mutual learning that's taking place, ensuring that You have access, which can mean meeting at an appropriate time when people can actually attend. Providing childcare, which the City of Salinas helped us with for our larger scale community meetings, providing food, and the type of translation, making sure that someone who's going to do translation speaks the type of Spanish, in this case, that is relevant to the community in which you're working. And then really making sure that you're working with partners who know the community and know the culture or the communities and know the cultures. That's key. And then providing opportunities for community members to participate in stewardship activities, hands-on activities, developing a sense of ownership on the property. And then holding space for challenging issues. So one of the big ones that's come up recently is gentrification related to developing new parks. And we are holding that space, obviously, where we don't have sole control over that outcome. But we are now looking at models and trying to learn from others on what models there are out there that could help address that issue. But that is a huge issue, and we're going to be devoting some resources to doing research around that issue and understanding how that issue could be abated if that's possible to do within the city. Lastly, and I'll wrap up.
Thank you. Great. Just coming online.
I'm wrapping up. Thanks. So this is my last slide. So as I said, this is a learning journey for us. To document our journey, we hired a fellow named Peter Forbes, who helped start an organization on the East Coast called the Center for Whole Communities, to help document some of our experiences. This document, there's the link there. You can find it online. If anyone is interested, you can email me and we can send you a hard copy of this. It really has a series of interviews and captures perspectives from different people in Salinas, and is the beginning part of what will be a fairly engaged and long story within the city. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much. I really appreciate and look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate the presentation. And I do want to note to our audience, we've seen from a few of you in the chat box that sometimes the audio is getting a little scrambled. We apologize for that. It's clear on our side, but I want to recognize those of you who have been having challenges. We are recording the webinar, so clean audio will be available after we complete. But at this time, with that, again, if you have more questions for Rachel, please pop them into the box and we will get to them after Michelle and David's presentation. So Michelle and David, take it away.
Hi, my name is Michelle Montano. I work as a project manager for green infrastructure with the Council for Watershed Health. I am here today to present to you Merced Avenue project with my colleague, actually, David Diaz. He is the executive director for Active San Gabriel Valley, and the Council for Watershed Health has asked them to head the community engagement for this particular Greenway project. So just to give you a little bit of background about the Council for Watershed Health, we're a Los Angeles-based nonprofit. Our mission is to advance the health and sustainability of the Los Angeles River and the San Gabriel River watersheds, the rivers and the streams and the habitat as well, both in natural areas and urban neighborhoods throughout the Los Angeles region. We do this through science-based research, education, and inclusive stakeholder engagement. So let me just go over what we're going to be presenting today. I'm going to give you a brief introduction about Merced Avenue Greenway, talk about our goals and objectives, and then I'm going to hand the mic over to David Diaz, who will go into the meat and potatoes of the community engagement activities, and we'll go into some of the challenges we face, and we'll end it, and then we'll be able to go into the Q&A right after. So this community process on Merced actually started in 2010 when the city of South El Monte was looking for ways to reduce some of the traffic issues that were happening up along the area to kind of improve and calm the traffic, improve public safety in the community. And so they developed this plan around revitalizing the Santa Anita and Tyler Avenue corridor, which included Merced Avenue. In 2013, the city then partnered with a nonprofit partnership, originally Day One and then Bike SGV, which then morphed into Active SGV, to create a bicycle master plan for the city of South El Monte that would create regional connections to neighboring cities like El Monte, Baldwin Park, and San Gabriel, as well as Monterey Park. And the plan was adopted by the city in December of 2014. In 2017, the city partnered with the Council for Watershed Health, Bike SGV, Climate Resolve, and put together a proposal for the reconfiguration of Merced Avenue, looking at some of these stormwater capture possibilities and taking a look at how we can create a 1 mile long greenway that will create multi-benefits for the community. So also looking at water quality issues as well as connections and kind of creating a more livable community. So just to give you a bit of background, for those who are not near us in and around the Los Angeles area, the city is located in the county of Los Angeles, and it's bounded on two sides by the San Gabriel Valley, two major drainage features, the Rio Hondo River on the west and the San Gabriel River on the east. And South El Monte has attracted a broad base of industrial users due to its location, because it's adjacent to rail lines and also the 60, the 605, and the 10 freeways. So this effort's focused on a 1.1 mile stretch of Merced Avenue that lies completely within the city of South El Monte. And kind of like the light orange color, that is the residential area of the project. And in the blue, you will see a light industrial area. So the project's length up along Merced is highlighted there. And we've got two very distinct different land uses that we are looking at with regards to this particular project. So as I stated, this is the picture of the light industrial north. The street has 4 through lanes and, as you can see, lacks any type of vegetation, canopy cover, permeable surfacing, any type of additional stormwater type features. It's a pretty old school road, and in some areas you'll see, like in the next slide, sections with no sidewalks. There's no access for handicap use. There are safety issues, as you can see. There's no lighting. There are flooding issues. And we've gotten statements from community members that said there's a lot of racing, street racing, and speeding down this road. So those are some of the issues that we've been looking at with regards to this project. On the southern end, this is an example of the southern end. And in this particular area, there are actually 2 trailer park communities there. And it's to the right, kind of right past the rocks and the palms. That's one of them. And, you know, for them, the issues that they're concerned with is just the safety. There are lots of children who are walking to and from school. There are several neighboring schools that are adjacent to Merced. There's Portero School, Miramonte Elementary, Dean Shively Middle School. So there are lots of kids that are actually walking around here. And, you know, we wanted to look at creating a safer street that also acted as kind of water quality. You know, they created some water quality opportunities to kind of clean the water and to, you know, infiltrate into groundwater. So the Merced Avenue Greenway Project's goal is to improve all of these functioning, to look at the environmental and community standpoint, and to kind of address the water quality, heat, public safety, and like I said, the livability of the area. So this plan is actually, just to let you know, it's not an implementation plan. It's purely a master planning project where we looked at some of these objectives. But once again, it's really a focus on low impact development, creating a greenway that actually can help the city to meet its MS4 permitting goals. So it's really that in essence, but then we wanted to create something that expanded beyond that, that created multi-benefits for the community directly on Merced and the community surrounding it. So we looked at capturing stormwater, looking at public safety issues, looking at UHI, and combating extreme heat, and also looking for opportunities to improve the ecological function of the area, as well as creating kind of these connections for pedestrians and bicyclists. So I'm going to hand this over to David, who will go over some of the community engagement activities he's been working on. David.
Thank you, Michelle. So hi, everyone. My name is David Diaz, and I'm the Executive Director of Active San Gabriel Valley, formerly known as Bike San Gabriel Valley. I'm also a lifelong resident of the El Monte and South El Monte area. Been there almost about 30 years. I went to school there, high school, elementary school, and then a neighboring community college. So I'm intimately familiar with the El Monte and South El Monte area. I wanted to add on just some of the things that Michelle was referencing in respect to South El Monte to give you good perspective. South El Monte is one of 31 cities located within eastern Los Angeles County in the San Gabriel Valley. It's approximately 3 square miles. According to the EPA, it is a top 5 disadvantaged community because of the burdens of pollution, low educational attainment, high unemployment rates. We are a park poor community. We have 0.41 acres per 1,000 residents, with roughly a population size of 22,000, where we have 19 to 20% of persons living in poverty. And then, interestingly enough, hardworking immigrant community, where about 44% are foreign-born, including myself. And so that's just to kind of give you a perspective and framing of the community that we're working in. So for us, community engagement, our philosophy is really that it's not an add-on, it's not an afterthought. It's something that should be captured within overall project development. Whenever projects are developed with community engagement as an add-on, you're really missing out on valuable community feedback to create a community-driven project. And so we kind of try to structure our community engagement activities around this philosophy. And so some of the things that we've done for this project include a logo and survey development that's multilingual. We created a brand for the project in the street to help people identify and raise the visibility of the project. We also conducted a city tour. We took elected officials, community members, various community commission members out to the city of Santa Ana, who has done quite a bit around active transportation in the respective community, to give them a frame of perspective of what a connected greenway network would look like in their city. We helped create a website. We've also conducted focus groups to make sure that we're talking to folks that are the most vulnerable. So one of them is the youth. And so we've been working hand in hand with some of the local youth from South El Monte High School to conduct a focus group, and as well as other activities, as well as the Best Start program in El Monte, South El Monte, which is an initiative out of First 5. LA, and we've also been working with the Chamber of El Monte and South El Monte to provide them with presentations and information around the project. We've also had one-on-one meetings with some of the mobile home owners that Michelle referenced to talk about their concerns and what things that they're looking at. And some of the future work is that we are going to identify a way to get some press coverage and have ongoing website updates, as well as more information tables. And so some of the other activities that we've added as part of this is that you can see that we're doing walk and bike audits. So a walk and bike audit is an activity in where we take community members to participate in actually conducting an environmental scan of their respective community. And so for this project, we're actually doing Merced Avenue. And so we're taking elected officials, community members, other stakeholders, around Merced Avenue to identify by foot and by bike to identify what issues or challenges or opportunities come up in terms of improvement. So with one of the challenges with Merced Avenue is that we have very little vegetation, no canopy. And so when conducting a walking audit on a hot day in October, it was very apparent to all the participants that we need much more canopy to provide shade. We also saw issues with ADA compliance that really provide people with a real life experience of what it's like to walk and bike on Merced Avenue. So we've been able to do that. Another thing is that, again, we like to meet people where they're at. And so we're going up and down the Merced Avenue corridor, talking to residents of South El Monte and as well as neighboring streets to talk to them about the project. Because oftentimes we see that, 1 to 3 community workshops will be held at some place, and we expect people to come out and to attend these meetings. However, we know that there are a lot of competing priorities. And so we really like to take the project information to them and seek their input, either for the survey design, let them know about the community workshop that's upcoming, and capture those comments. So we've actually directly canvassed up and down the street at least 8 times to this point, and we're going to do at least another 5 times before this is over. And so a 1.1 mile stretch in neighboring streets is quite a bit to cover, but we're committed to doing that. And then information booths. One of the things that we like to have is on an ongoing basis, have a way to connect with community members. So we like to be present at community events. So concerts in the park, health fairs, older adult activities. We like to attend so that if folks have questions about the project or don't know about the project, it's another opportunity for us to engage them. And you may see in this picture a wheel. It's actually a great tool to get people to come to your booth if you're looking for that. It's actually a wheel that we've retrofitted to actually spin, and then depending on what color you get a corresponding prize, one of which is a high five. So some folks love that one, the others are disappointed, but it depends where you're at. So information booths are really important to keep people engaged in the process and visible. So knowing that we're not just, again, just hosting one workshop and then not being visible, or they don't know where to connect with the project. The other thing is that we actually relocated our community workshop from, the first one was about 0.25. This one was like right on the corner. All they had to do was walk outside. This is an underutilized patch of green space that's actually along the Merced Avenue corridor, and where we conducted the community workshop and a demonstration event where we're soliciting community member input and feedback on a couple things. So to the left, you see Tetra Tech talking about some of the project design and alternatives, the benefits, where community members are learning about that. Those boards are multilingual, and they're actually able to vote on which design they like best. Right in the same picture to the right of that, there's a water capture demonstration happening there. There's a little model that the Council for Watershed Health utilizes. On the right, you actually see a family that has just taken a trip to actually experience what it would look like to have a protected bikeway to get to and from the Merced Avenue corridor. So these folks are actually filling out an experiential survey and how it felt to ride up and down Merced Avenue through either walking or biking with the new vegetation. So this next picture here, you see that on the left, we have a cyclist that is riding in a protected buffer through this vegetation and cones that we've created. The car there is parked, it's not moving. And so you see that, we're providing a barrier between the car, right, and the people who are walking and biking. And one of the design options is to have the bikeway the same level, bidirectional, as the sidewalk. There's another one that looks like this that has kind of a buffer at the street level. And then there's another one where it's just all paint. However, we've seen that the most favored ones are the ones that have a buffer, because we know that paint on the ground isn't going to protect anyone or a car or distracted driver from hitting someone. The picture on the right, so all the bikes that they have right now, we provided all the bikes for them to be able to check out and ride up and down the street. These young ladies rode a lot of times up and down the street safely, without much supervision, which is what we're trying to get to, which to a good point of safety, which is we want it to be safe enough where we feel okay about children being able to walk across the street. And often when we ask people that, that's not a reality. People do not feel safe having their child cross the street safely, much less bike, but it shouldn't mean that we shouldn't aspire to have that. And so all to say is that through this workshop, we weren't just presenting things to them, but it was interactive. They got to test ride some of the demonstration, things that could possibly happen on the street. We provided free food, activities for people. The materials were multilingual. And then on this day actually rained earlier and then it cleared out. So ended up being a really good event. And then here, this is actually the former mayor of South El Monte. As you can see, this is the first time I've ridden a bike in a long time. And we think that because in the city of South El Monte, you have almost no bikeway infrastructure except for 2 streets. Have a class 3 and a class 4, which is very minimal. That's not connected. Folks don't ride their bikes as much as we would like to see. It's about 0.8 of the modal share overall, but we feel that if you build a connected, protected neighborhood greenway infrastructure, people are going to use their bikes more often. And that's one of the things that I failed to mention earlier is that on top of the other disparities that our communities face, we actually have the highest childhood obesity rate of any incorporated city within LA County. And so for us, this is a way to address multiple disparities within the community, from the public safety, physical activity, the water capture, and other. So that's the approach that we like to take. Some of the challenges that you folks may be familiar with are NIMBYism. If you're not familiar with what NIMBYism is, that's not in my backyard. Essentially, characterization of opposition by residents to a proposed development in the local area. I think that there will always, regardless of how great the project is, there will always be a couple folks that don't want to see change. And so I think that you have to always plan for that to be able to mitigate that. Also, the national and local political climate. I mentioned that we were doing a lot of direct canvassing. At the time that we were doing the canvassing, you have one of the scariest times for immigrant communities to have people show up to your house and ask you for information. And so really being sensitive around when you do it, how you do it, who does it, what do those people look like. We enact a local hire policy. We like to meet people where they're at again. So being sensitive to that, and then also the local political climate. So when we started the project, it wasn't the same city council that's currently on board, and so you have to account for that too, and never assume anything. So being able to work with your local champions and community members to make sure that the respective decision makers know that this is a community-driven process, and the project designs and options are reflective of what the community would like to see in their community. So those are some of the challenges that we're currently facing. And that's it for me right now. Just going to hand it back over to the Coastal Conservancy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David and Michelle. That was a fantastic presentation. So we've been tracking the questions provided by the audience, and with our remaining time, I'm going to start asking a few of these to our presenters. If you have more questions, please feel free to keep entering them. So first one, and I think we'll start by directing this to Rachel. Rachel, you gave a phenomenal dialogue on the just the persistence and the long time scales it can really take to cultivate and sustain community engagement efforts. And we had a question from an audience member. Do you have any thoughts on how to approach community engagement when you're in a position of being charged with doing it, but you're forced on a very compressed timeline and you don't control the timeline? So Rachel, if you'd like to take that first, and then Michelle and David, if you have
Sure. That was a great question. I saw that in the question box. We got initially when we set up our CARR Lake Partners group, one of the members of that said, well, can't you guys just wait? There's a lot of stuff going on in the city. Couldn't you wait 4 or 5 years? And obviously we couldn't. and we had to be upfront about that in terms of how we were going to move ahead and engage with people who had the opportunity and the time to engage with us. There are obviously a lot of deadlines that we don't have control over once we enter the city process and we start going through CEQA. There will be a set of timelines associated with that that we'll have to adhere to, and we have grant timelines to adhere to as well. So in terms of answering that question, I think it's always best to be straightforward, to find a couple of champions who are well acquainted with the community in which you're working, and to try and work through those organizations, to look to them to suggest ways to go to where people are rather than have them come to you. So there may be existing meetings that are going on about other things that you can piggyback on and find out what those are. So, you know, tagging on to existing meetings so you're not, you know, you're taking advantage of the already kind of existing community infrastructure that's there to have your engagement through, identifying key champions, and being very upfront about your timelines and what the real opportunity is and what the real living constraints are.
Thanks, Rachel. Michelle and David, any further thoughts on how to make best of a compressed timeline that you're handed along with the charge to do community engagement?
Sure. David, do you mind if I start this and then you can add on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. You know, for me, usually when I'm on a tight timeline and I really have some goals I need to meet, you know, what I like to do is just prioritize everything. So I create my list of priorities with my outreach goals there. That way, you know, having a visual kind of list to reference always helps me, as I'm a visual person. So creating that list and then understand which effort will have the strongest and biggest impact. So like Rachel said, it's those strong community partners that you need that can help you kind of to reach those goals. You can actually, you know, divvy up the outreach, and that way, you know, you're in more places than one, you know. And you need to remember that the community is really what makes or breaks the project. They are the ones that help drive it, and they are the ones that help to make it a success. So, you know, throughout the whole process, you want to make sure that it's inclusive of both the government agencies that you're working with. If you're working with a particular city, or you're working with the county, or working with the state, you know, we really want to keep the communication strong, and that will help them feel more comfortable with you, especially when you're asking for favors and things are, you know, sometimes these things happen so fast and you really need to turn things around last minute, and there's a lot of you know, urgency with some of these things. So you kind of just need to just prioritize, you know, take that deep breath and kind of just dig in and kind of divvy up some of those tasks.
Michelle, I'm going to interject very quickly. This is Julia again at Coastal Conservancy. I want to note, respecting people's time, I see it's already 1 o'clock. Our hour flew by. 2 o'clock, excuse me. We're going to stay on the line for 2 more questions, but of course, you know, thank you for participating. And if it's time for you to head out, thanks for being here today. So back to this question, David, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything on this question of community engagement when you're forced on a short timeline, or else I'll head to the next question.
Yeah, I guess real quickly, it's a case-by-case basis, like depending on the project. But all to say that as a community-based organization, we've passed on opportunities if we feel like this project is moving forward without community-driven input. Because at the end of the day, if it's something that the community doesn't desire, do you really want to build that project? So again, it's, project by project basis, and, scenarios are different for everyone, but just really analyzing the project itself. And I mean, is that something that you really want to move forward with?
That's a terrific answer. Thank you, David. And this next question, I'm going to actually direct to you, David. It came in during your presentation about some of the community outreach approaches that your project utilized. There was a mention of focus groups, and one of our attendees wondered, can non-experts run focus groups? And if so, is there any sort of guidance out there about how to run a good focus group? Or do you think focus groups should really be contracted out, that facilitation should come from an expert? I don't know if they mean a private organization or a community expert. But some thoughts there about focus group facilitation.
Yeah, it'd be helpful to know how they're defining expert.
Yeah, right.
I think that would be helpful, but so for our focus group, what we do is we work with the project team to develop consistency around the ways that we're measuring input or capturing input. And then from there, my team, Active SGV, will work with respective community groups to facilitate the conversation. And I think that's one of the things unique to the Merced Avenue project, is that you have a lot of community-based organizations that are actually included from the inception of the project and all throughout to work on this. And so I think being able to define expert is a question I have for the person, but we at Active SGV do the facilitation around the focus groups. But I think it could be.
I wonder, David, if maybe they mean, since Active SGV is truly community experts in the local community, maybe they mean if one is a content expert, like a hydrologist or, I don't know, a facilitation person, but they're not an expert on the local community, are there thoughts if they should be the ones running focus groups or not?
Yeah, I mean, you can. I think if you're working with a community-based group or someone that has local knowledge and you're working to capture their input and feedback, I think in the strategies that you all take from the beginning is really what's important. So if you find, all right, we want to do a focus group, how should we do the focus group? And then you go from having consistency around the table from what the consultant's going to be able to do. There have been some consultants that don't feel comfortable, not for this particular project, don't feel comfortable doing the facilitation. That's fine. But I think that you can work with a local expert, someone to develop how you're going to measure it, how you're going to present it, and then implement it. But it depends.
Excellent. Thank you, David. So as a final wrap-up question, I know a lot of our audience was interested in funding approaches. So both on CARR Lake and on the Merced project, maybe starting with you, Rachel, on CARR Lake, what sorts of budget or funding sources were you able to utilize for this public outreach? Clearly, it takes a lot of sustained resources to be able to do this thorough level of work.
Right. A diversified funding base is important, obviously, in all the work that we do. The community engagement work was primarily funded, though not exclusively, but primarily funded by private funding from foundations. We also connected to foundations who we hadn't had a relationship with before, like the California Wellness Foundation, who looks at public health issues. And they helped fund a lot of our initial community engagement work. So we've really outreached to a number of private foundations to find that funding. As also that's important match to the public funding that we've gotten for the acquisition, for the planning, for the more technical analyses and the planning elements, and to have that private funding to match public funding is an important consideration.
Thank you. Michelle and David, any thoughts on funding sources that help sustain community engagement efforts?
Sure. This is Michelle. We were able to secure some supplemental funding to help with the design for Merced Avenue through Disney. So we were able to leverage the funding that we got from the Coastal Conservancy to get this Disney grant. And this Disney grant has actually helped to facilitate our workshops and to actually create a more robust program with regards to giving David a bit more flexibility to do some of the things that the Coastal Conservancy grant doesn't cover. So it's kind of nice to kind of have this additional funding to help support, but we're also still looking because we do still want to do some more outreach. We're looking at every other opportunity. So I have a colleague here at the council who is kind of scoping out some of these opportunities to kind of leverage what we have with the State Coastal Conservancy to actually create even a more meaningful, if you can even imagine, outreach type, activities.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, with that, thank you everyone who stuck around for the Q&A. There were more excellent questions, but I hope we at least hit the ones that I think summarized some of those core areas of interest folks shared at the beginning of the webinar. As a reminder, we have been recording today, so we will be sending out the link if you had audio issues. Again, our apologies and thanks for your persistence. We're hopeful that the recording will have clean audio. And we'll also be sharing our draft tips for community engagement. Again, we would love your feedback, provided in whatever format you find able to work on your end. We'll be looking forward to that. So thank you for joining us today, and thanks again to all of our speakers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.